Hello, I'm Cheryl Morales of the Newport News Tourism Office, and welcome to What's New in Newport News. Today's show is a little special as I won't be interviewing representatives of our industry, but rather representatives of organizations that are helping and protecting our industry and our community, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. So with me today, I have Eric Terry. He's the president of the Virginia Restaurant and Lodging and Travel Association, and Ray Mattis. He is the president and CEO of the Retail Alliance, the Retail Merchants Association. And I want to thank you both for being with us today.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Morning.
Well, Eric, let's start with you. The Virginia Restaurant, Lodging, and Travel Association is one strong voice for our tourism industry. Can you tell our audience about your organization?
Well, we represent hotels, restaurants, tourism attractions, all sorts of tourism into the state. And we have about 1,500 members statewide, with many of them in the Hampton Roads area. And you know, our role is really as a trade association, kind of protecting their interests and hopefully promoting tourism. As you know, the Virginia Tourism Corporation, which is our statewide tourism organization, doesn't actually lobby on their own behalf. So we actually are responsible for helping them to raise funds and market the state. And so we were very, very active from a governmental affairs point of view, both here in Richmond as well as in individual communities.
Well, that does lead me on to my next question I had for you. And it stems back in February, early February, before all of this COVID-19 had really hit us. You had reported to the Newport News Hospitality Association that General Assembly was acting on some bills that really would affect our industry, such as raising the minimum wage to $15, increasing hotel lodging tax to help fund the Hampton Roads public transit, tax equalizations between localities. I mean, there's just so many bills that were out there, but those are just a few. Can you explain the impact these bills would have on our industry, and mainly because of your efforts, give us a status of them?
Sure. Well, obviously, you know, anything that sort of arbitrarily establishes a minimum wage rather than letting businesses set those wages, we think is really not good policy. However, what was implemented really would eventually raise minimum wage to $15 an hour. And obviously, as you look back today, that looks like that's going to be a pretty onerous thing to do to our business and industry. And the good news is that the governor did put a little bit of a delay on the enactment of that, about 4 months. So hopefully we can revisit that in the next legislative session. But in terms of taxation, yes, I mean they're really have looked at the hotel and the restaurant industry and really tourism attractions as well, because they want to implement a tax on attractions as kind of a cash cow. And unfortunately, in today's environment, as we sit here, how many months into COVID-19, those are really going to be an impediment to us, kind of recovering the industry. And so we're hopeful that we can revisit some of those in the next legislative session to really right-size some things and look at better implementation. And the good news is the governor on several of those has delayed some enactments, so we'll have an opportunity to revisit them in the next legislative session. But things that really would, without a public vote on raising lodging taxes in the counties, meals taxes, admissions taxes, we really think that the citizens ought to have a right to vote on those things. And I think you can't implement so many negative requirements on one industry or several industries and expect them to be able to recover. And so I think we're going to have to really take a hard look at that as we look at any of the other sorts of recovery programs and grant programs that are out there that can help the industry. And I think when you look at it today, hotels and restaurants are probably the tip of the spear in terms of the most impacted industries right now today.
Absolutely.
And the slowest to begin to recover. So I do think Virginia is going to have to take a hard look at that. And I think it's we're not in the same economy that we were back in February. And so, you got to look much more critically at what's going to impact and help those businesses recover.
Yes, as you said, the cash cow really isn't there right now because of what we're going through, and it really has hit the retail segment as well too, Ray. And I know that you also are helping our businesses along the way with this. But first, can you tell our audience about who is Retail Alliance and what you do for the community and how long you've been serving the community?
We've been around since 1903. We were formed in downtown Norfolk. Uh, Contrary to a lot of belief, I did not start in 1903. I've been with the organization since 1983. We actually have four different business units or companies underneath the Retail Alliance umbrella. We have our trade association, which has retail members as well as restaurants. We have our advocacy company called the Virginia Retail Federation. We have two full-time lobbyists that work throughout the General Assembly and throughout the whole year lobbying on behalf of merchants. We have both mom and pops as well as big boxes in the Retail Federation. That is a entity that is co-owned by ourselves and the Merchants Association of Greater Richmond. We also have a foundation, which is a 501c3 that houses our education. We have the Center for Retail Operations. It's a 14-week class that prepares aspiring as well as existing retailers on what is necessary or the behaviors necessary to operate a successful retail operation. We also have a for-profit that is really the remnants of our credit bureau days. We represent Equifax in the states of South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Northern Virginia, Delaware, and Maryland. So we have boots on the ground that goes out and sees the financial, or they serve the financial industry segment, and we're responsible for a lot of those Equifax relationships, and that really is what helps funds the organization.
And I know you were a real big part of helping our small businesses in the coastal Virginia area during this COVID-19 with the CARES Act, for example, that was developed, and the PPP loan forgiveness benefits for these communities, for these businesses. Tell us the process that you went through to help them. These filling out these loans was incredible, these applications and all, and it really took a village to help these businesses out. So how did you do that, and is it still a process? What is the status of that?
Well, I mean, unlike Eric, I think that Eric's organization and ours have similar challenges from an advocacy standpoint. To start off with, we're very into the minimum wage, felony threshold, things of that nature that really impacts retailers. And when COVID came out in March, we had to pivot. COVID impacted all four of our business units. Bring up the advocacy part of it because our lobbyists had to get into the ears of a lot of our legislators about postponing some of the initiatives or the legislative initiatives that were created during the General Assembly, like minimum wage, things of that nature. We started on March 27th with weekly COVID-19 briefings. We have conducted 14 of those since then. We have since put them on an as-need basis, but we began with helping our members, and we opened it up to our members and non-members alike, by the way. But we helped them with the PPP application process. We also helped them with the EIDL, the EIDL. We had accountants, we had bankers, community bankers, and we helped them go through the process of applying for those loans. We also picked up our game as far as webinars and podcasts. We use the time to help educate because a lot of our guys were shut down initially, especially those in malls, which were shut down, or at least they curtailed back on their hours. So it was a good opportunity for them to sharpen up their games. And I'm proud of our guys because it's created a lot of creativity and ingenuity, even in the restaurant area where they had to open up against some really tough guidelines and still make ends meet as far as taking care of their staff is concerned. We also took them through the various guidelines as it pertained to phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and we explained what steps they needed to do to adhere to those guidelines. Our crops program, our education program, we pivoted from being in person to being virtual, which, with a challenge comes an opportunity. That could be something that we can launch in future years to be a national initiative. We've got 23 students actually participating in that class. We also have been handing out masks. We are able to have access to thousands or several thousand masks, and we've been, they're cotton masks, and they can be washable up to 15 times per, and they're really used for our members and non-members, for their staff to use in order to adhere to the guidelines and also to keep their people staffed. So my personal staff, I'm very proud of them. Our boots on the ground have been out there. They've stayed in touch, either through physical meetings as well as calls, emails, things of that nature, and just keeping them in the loop on this environment and as it changes.
Oh, I totally agree. Your weekly emails, the daily newsletters at the very beginning were just filled with information for people to use. And even your promotional activities such as, buy local, your love notes, things like that have really kept the community together and to help through this stage. So I want to thank you and your team very much.
To sort of echo what Ray said, I think right now it's a really critical time for us to support our industries, and much like what Ray's organization did. I mean, we supported both members and non-members in this process because, I think that's important, in this kind of an environment. And, now as we begin to look at recovery, we're trying to work on, sort of programs that, again, I think one of the things that I'm seeing right now is that customers are not yet comfortable coming back into our businesses. And so how do we create some programs that they feel comfortable with? And we've done a couple of things through the American Hotel and Lodging Association, who's our national partner, Safe Stay program that, cleans, has room cleanliness protocols and whatnot. And through the National Restaurant Association, which we're also affiliated with, we've got a serve success program and a serve safe program for COVID-19 training. So, I think the more visible we, the cleanliness standards and things are going to help people get back into that. But I do think that that's going to be one of our big challenges is people that are comfortable. We've been telling people for, 3 months, don't go out, don't go to a restaurant, don't go to a retail store, don't do any of those sort of things. So now we got to be saying, okay, it's okay to come back out a little bit.
Okay, so little by little, which brings me, Eric, to a question with regards to hotels. How is Hampton Roads hotels faring compared to the rest of the Commonwealth, and then compared to the rest of the United States? How are we?
Well, I haven't seen any numbers in the last 10 days or so, but in the last, prior to that, Virginia statewide, we were hovering at about a 40% occupancy, which is down from almost 70% occupancy in a prior year. In Hampton Roads, we've actually fared a little bit better because we've got a little bit of a leisure traveler who's coming in, whether they're going to the beach or they're going, wherever. So Hampton Roads has actually fared a little bit better than the rest of the state. Maybe one of the worst performing areas is Northern Virginia, who's very reliant on corporate and government military travel, which is gone. There's just none of that happening. And so, they've been the most hard hit area statewide. And I think the leisure travelers are beginning to travel again. People want to get out of their house and do something. And so I do think that Hampton Roads is pretty well, positioned for that. However, again, especially our beach locations, they rely on a really robust season about 4 months out of the year to survive the rest of the year. And so, that's going to be a challenge, I think, as we exit the summer. And if students go back to school and, one way or another, they're going to be back in school. And so, that's going to really cut into that travel a little bit for leisure purposes. So, I think it's going to be a long road to recover. Corporate meetings, things like that just aren't really, bouncing back. And so, I think sports travel, youth sports and things are beginning to open up a little bit. And that'll create some demand. But, I think we're talking about probably an 18-month recovery for the lodging industry.
And Ray, with the retail sector, usually this is the time that they're making their money, so that come, Black Friday, we can get all those great sales and such, and I don't know about that this year. So tell me, how is the sector handling, how are they recovering right now?
I'm concerned. I'm concerned with the little guys. If they didn't have 3 to 6 months of cash reserves for operations, that's worrisome. I know that a lot of landlords have been flexible as far as adapting to this environment, and they've been more forgivable, I guess, or more lenient on rent payments. It appears now that retailers must mandate that the customers wear masks, and that puts the retailers in a very a predicament, because now they have to enforce a mandate, which initially it was up to the consumers. So that creates that. It's just going to see what happens. Back to what Erica really brought up, and I think is a very strong thing. It's not that our guys aren't ready; it's the consumers aren't ready. And it's going to be when the level of confidence increases that will get consumers out to start shopping. A lot of our guys had to pivot, as we all have had to pivot and go virtually. A lot of our members have had to pivot and go online, curbside delivery, those types of things. And that, I think that's a positive, because some of them were reluctant to go into online sales, and this has forced that initiative. But on the other side, are they able to have enough commerce to maintain? And when I talk to our guys, and we do a lot of surveys, as you know, Cheryl, most of our guys are more concerned about their staff than they are their own back pockets. Yeah. And it's just refreshing to see the creativity again and the ingenuity that these guys have done to stay in business, to be able to take care of their staff. I think another big obstacle is staffing in itself, because of the unemployment initiative that the federal government has done. Our guys, they don't pay those minimum wage is $10 an hour. I mean, I know it's going to go up to 15, but the unemployment, they're paid to stay home.
I've also seen that in the restaurant industry as well, and Eric, maybe you want to jump in on that. It's tough because of the fact of the pay, that is related to our industry, let's face it. And then you brought in the help that was needed. It really was from the government, but it also affected us because they were making more money staying home instead of going back to, for example, a restaurant, which we had one in particular in Newport News that this happened to, that she couldn't get her staff to come back. But overall, Eric, how is our restaurants faring in coastal Virginia?
I think we're just now beginning to see the wave of closures, and one in particular, you probably are referring to the same one I am, that's been in business for 50 years.
It is.
In Newport News, and was a restaurant that I visited, when I was growing up there, and it's unfortunate to see something like that, but their challenges were getting staff back on board and hiring them back. And so, as Ray said, I think at the time it was implemented, it was absolutely necessary and it was needed. As we start to sort of open things back up and we try to rehire people, you've got to create an incentive for them to come back to work and want to do that. And I'm seeing even at our fast food restaurants where there are help wanted signs, and so they're struggling to get people back in. And so, but going back to the idea of closures, I think we've seen some closures which were somewhat anticipated, but I think you're now beginning to see the more aggressive closures of restaurants. Some of the national chains who are sort of evaluating, units that might have not been, might have been marginal or weren't, necessarily as profitable as others. They're just making decisions to close those. And so I think you're going to start to see, I don't have an estimate. People keep asking me to give them an estimate of how many restaurants are closing. My number is you may be between 15 and 20% of restaurants that are going to be closing permanently. And, there's nothing scientific about that. And it's really difficult to track. But I think that's going to continue for a while and may really accelerate. Typically in Hampton Roads in particular, our restaurants have a pretty busy season, for about 6 months out of the year, and then the winter months are a little bit slower. And on top of that, the Department of Defense put out a directive for active duty military not to eat in restaurants, indoors at least, and that's a killer for us in Hampton Roads, where so much of our population is military or military dependent.
Well, Ray, on a little brighter note, I know your organization has some very special awards that you give out, and you just announced recently the 2020 Achievement Award, and the winner goes to someone in Newport News. Can you tell us more?
Yes, Hauser Jewelers.
Hauser's Jewelers.
They are I want to say they're a sixth generation business. We have our annual Retailer of the Year event. We have not canceled any of our events. We've just shifted them to being virtual. And every year we recognize a Lifetime Achievement Award business. And the criteria for that is longevity, community involvement, visual merchandising, reputation throughout the community, things of that nature. And Hauser is it's a well-deserved business that is this year's recipient. So yeah, we're very proud to honor that.
That's fantastic. And Eric, you too. You have what's called the Ordinary Award, which really isn't so ordinary, is it?
Not at all. We named those or renamed our awards a couple of years ago after the ordinaries were an old English term that found its way into Virginia, where it was a full meal at an inn, and one of the first ordinaries was in Northern Virginia, and so we came up with this great idea of calling them the Ordinary Awards, and they've been around for a number of years. So we have opened our nominations up for the Ordinary Awards, and we're taking nominations for that. We plan, fingers crossed, to have a face-to-face luncheon and awards on September the 29th in Richmond. But we really, it's an opportunity to recognize the best and the brightest from our industries. We have literally hundreds of nominations each year that come in for that. And so, we're very excited to continue that this year, again, because, we do think that, we are the meetings in the hotel industry. So you ought to meet at some point. You ought to give it a shot. So hopefully, again, if we stay in the phase that we are, we'll be able to do something, face to face for that, which I think will be exciting.
Well, Eric, on that same note, what do you think of some of the future changes that are going to be happening to our industry? You just topped on one with regards to conferences and such. What else do you see coming?
Well, I think the social distancing is here to stay for some time until we see a vaccine or something else like that. So I mean, I think that's going to be a challenge, for our restaurants or our hotels, to have meetings and distance people, further apart, which means those old hotel capacity charts are probably thrown out the window. You're going to have to rework all of those kind of things. And it's had a big impact on the weddings business. Even the weddings, that are now able to hold 250 people, they're having to sort of cap those sort of things. And so, I think the industry's in for, a long change of business, of just how people meet. And, I think Zoom, while it has been great during this process, I think, all those technologies are going to change the way people meet, and how frequently they meet. And unfortunately, it probably does mean that we're probably talking about less meetings in the future and more, virtual meetings and whatnot. So, I do think there'll be a pretty big pivot that we're going to see. And it's even businesses like Busch Gardens, who hasn't yet reopened and hasn't gotten any guidance to do that, I think they're going to have to change their business model. I heard a news story this morning that Disney has reopened some of their parks today. And so just how they do business and what protocols they have, it's going to be a new game.
Yes, absolutely.
And unfortunately, it's going to be an expensive game. The cost of doing some of that is not cheap, whether for all of our industries. Just the costs of whether it's, PPE or, barriers or what have you, it's not cheap.
No, signage, etc. Yes, no, I agree. Not to mention the fact of the length of time it's going to take before it could really be established as well is costly. So, yeah, no, I agree. And Ray, what about the new normal for retail? What do you see in our future?
Well, I think a lot of our guys were starting to get hit by the national online retailers such as Amazon and Walmart. We all know the players. Some of them have been reluctant to get into that. This is, of course, forced that initiative. So I think you're going to see more of that. The competition online is always going to be there. I think the biggest thing, the elephant in the room, is the vaccine. Once the vaccine is out there and it's been tested and can be distributed, and people can start taking advantage of that, I think then we will get back to, I don't want to say normal, because I don't think anything will be what it was. I think this is life changing for a lot of businesses and a lot of industries and for consumers in general. But they're just going to have to adjust to this changing environment. Those that have the withdrawal to stay in it.
Well, we certainly have covered a lot today, and I want to thank you both for being with us. I really appreciate it. We will also encourage our industry to go to your websites and take a look at membership opportunities too, for it. And I want to thank you guys for helping our businesses. And I want to thank you for joining us today. I hope that this closer look behind the scenes of what these organizations are doing and helping and protecting our community businesses was enlightening to you. So again, thank you for watching and take care.